So for Casa Grande, this is question 1. I wouldn't suggest Elliott to give them a cash advance at all. And the reason for this is ultimately because I believe they're not going to survive as a business. And what led me to believe this is a multitude of things. First, I looked at their inventory turnover, their accounts payable, their CFO to debt, current ratio, quick ratio, the CFO to current and the CFO to current liabilities. So to begin, first off, their inventory turnover. If you look at page 1 of the financial statements, when looking at their inventory turnover, for 2000 it was 20.11, for 2001 it was 28.66, for 2002 it was 23.70. You divide all of these by 365 because there's 365 days in a year, and from that you're going to get that in they're holding on to inventory ranging from 13 to 18 days throughout the years of 2000 and 2002. So Downtown Grill, on the other hand, if you look at page 2, their inventory turnover was 40.79, and when you divide all of that by 365 days, consistently, when you average it out, they are only holding on to inventory for 9 days throughout those years, and that's actually really great inventory turnover. So this kind of leads me to believe that Casa Grande doesn't really know how to run a business proficiently, and they're not going to ultimately stay open as a business. So next, what I looked at was their accounts payable. So when looking at Casa Grande's accounts payable, when it came to paying suppliers back in 2000, you can look at page 1. You can refer to page 1 on the accounts payable. You divide those numbers once again. 2000, 85.32, 54.96 in 2001, 86.81 in 2002 by 365 days. So that comes out to in 2000, 30 days, and in 2001, 35 days, and in 2002, 34 days. So that means it took them anywhere up to 35 days to pay suppliers back. Now this leads me to believe that it takes them 35 days to pay suppliers back. How long is it going to take them to pay an investor back who's loaning them $5 million? This kind of makes me a little iffy on how reliable they are as a company, and it kind of also makes me believe that I might be last in line as to who they're going to pay back. So next, what I looked at was kind of probably something a little more significant, because accounts payable and inventory turnover, yes, they are factors, but they're not as significant on the ratios, was CFO to debt. Now this ratio measures the number of times cash from operations covers debt. So the higher the ratio, the better, because obviously you need cash to pay off any debt. However, in Casa Grande's case, this ratio showed that they were far from a credit-worthy company, as their ratio ranged, as you can see on page 1, if you go back to page 1, from in the years 2000 to 2002, negative 0.19 to negative 0.22. Usually, most credit-worthy companies exhibit about a ratio of 1, and investment-grade companies exhibit about a ratio of 0.35, which obviously Casa Grande didn't exhibit either of these characteristics. So then we went on to look at their current ratio. And current ratio is useful when you're looking at, when short-term creditors, such as myself, are trying to determine if the company has the ability to pay you off in the case of the company having to be liquidated. So in Casa Grande's case, if they were to go out of business, looking at those numbers, you could refer back to page 1, they have 13 cents in current assets for every dollar in current liabilities. Looking at the bigger picture, this evaluation in a case such as this is absolutely worthless. It would bring in no money for me trying to gain back money from Casa Grande for the money that I would be lending out. When analyzing a quick ratio, it's important to look at this if you believe it's likely the company you're investing is going to go out of business, which I believe is going to be the case for Casa Grande. So when I looked at this, from 2000 to 2002, the ratio was below 1. In 2000, it was 0.07. In 2001, it was 0.19. In 2002, 0.06. So this company has no ability to cover liquid liabilities, and if it were to close down. Once again, another reason for me to believe that I don't want to loan it any money at all. Last, CFO to current liabilities. This measures the number of times operating cash flow covers current liabilities. So the higher the measure, the more likely firms are able to pay off their current liabilities. However, when looking at Casa Grande's ratios from 2000 to 2002, these ratios ranged from negative 0.38 in 2000, negative 0.37 in 2001, negative 0.42 in 2002. So what analysts usually say when you look at these ratios for this is they like to see a ratio above 0.40. Another supportive implication as to my reasoning as to why I believe overall Casa Grande provides pretty much more risks than rewards as a company to invest in. And it seems their main issues are their poor business skills, their inability to pay suppliers back within a decent amount of time, their debt, and their lack of items to liquidate in the case that they were to go out of business. So ultimately, this leads me to believe that I just don't want to invest in them. For question number 2, if regardless of whether you recommended a cash advance to Casa Grande or not, assume pretty much I were to give them $1 million anyway, what would be the financial and the performance covenants I would require? So to begin, when I did this question, I pretty much looked at the things that made me uneasy about Casa Grande, and what that came down to was the fact that if they were to go out of business, what would I be able to liquidate? Nothing. So I'd want cash on hand. Another thing that bothered me was their debt. That's really worrisome to me. So I took notice of these things when coming up with these covenants, and I took notice of things that bothered me and what I'd want to change about their company. So to begin, one of the financial metric covenants I would require for Casa Grande to abide by would be to have an average quick ratio every year that could not be below 0.26. I came up with this ratio from Downtown Grill's quick ratio, which could be found on page 2 of the financial statement, page 2. And that was just because I felt comfortable with their financial standpoint in comparison to Casa Grande's. Another covenant I require is to have Casa Grande manage their finances better and make sure to pay me back in a timely manner and make sure I'm not the last person on their list who's going to be getting paid back. So to do so, I would make their EBITDA to debt ratio positive in order to ensure that Casa Grande can cover their debt while also making sure that Rewards Network be one of the first things on the list to be paid back. The last financial metric covenant that I would instate would be to make their cash flow from operations to be at least 0.1, similar to Downtown Grill. And that could be in a relationship to the amount of debt they owe. So they have enough money to pay off their debt and become cash flow positive quickly at the same time. I would require cash flow positive from operations within 2 years at 0.11, similar to Downtown Grill. So those are 2. I would require both of those things. For their performance metric covenant, I would require them to meet the same operating income to sales as Downtown Grill met in 2001 at negative 0.07. This ratio is an operations measure excluding taxes, interest, and special items, which may not depend directly on operations, but it does represent the operating return on dollar of sales. And this will help Casa Grande increase their operating income to sales, which was a concern of mine, to the overall evaluation of the company, which was ranging from negative 0.8 to negative 0.15 from the years 2000 2002, which was just too low for me to feel comfortable with. Next, question number 3, focusing on Downtown Grill now. You can find their financial statement on page 2. I would not loan them the $5 million. However, I would feel comfortable loaning them $2 million. And the reason for this is I base this off of their low inventory turnover, but their increasing accounts payable over the years kind of made me uncomfortable. Also, I analyzed their CFO to debt ratio. their current ratio, their CFO to current liabilities, and their quick ratio. So to begin, Downtown Grill had an extremely low inventory turnover, and you can see that looking at page 2. At their inventory turnover ratio, we divided all of those numbers by 365, giving us 9 days of inventory, meaning that they were only holding on to 9 days of inventory, which was even better than Cheesecake, as they had a ratio of 11.5, so they were doing better than Cheesecake, which is awesome. However, the main reason I didn't feel comfortable, one of the main reasons I didn't feel comfortable lending Downtown Grill the full $5 million was because their accounts payable kept on escalating throughout the years. In 2000, if you look at page 2, we divided all of those numbers by 365 as well to come up with these numbers I'm about to tell you. They were paying their suppliers back within 4 days, which is great. That's awesome. And by 2001, that escalated up to 11 days. And by 2002, it escalated up even higher to 28 days. This kind of leads me to believe that if they had a difficult time maintaining consistently with paying back their suppliers, I kind of believe that might have replicated a similar consistently with how they're going to pay me back, and if that's kind of going to be the same thing, so I wouldn't feel comfortable lending them that $5 million. Once again, these are just small implications as to looking at their ratios and not really a very good reflection of how the company is overall. So next I looked at their CFO to debt ratio, which ranged from 0.09 to 0.11. And although the most creditworthy companies exhibit amounts usually above 1, and investing grade companies are above 0.35, as I stated before, they were at least above Casa Grande, which fell in the negatives. And they were also successfully able to stay within the positive range. So I'll give them that. They're not in debt. Their current ratio, as explained, I explained what that was earlier. In 2000, it began at 0.93. In 2001, it went down to 0.70, and by 2002, went even further down to 0.59. So this means by 2002, Downtown Grill had 59 cents in current assets for every dollar in current liabilities. Now, although these numbers as well continued to escalate, it exceeded Casa Grande's range, which ranged from 0.13 to 0.26, and therefore it provides more liquidity and security, in my case as an investor, in the case of it shutting down as a business. So I like the fact that it's more liquid than Casa Grande. Then I looked over the CFO to current liabilities, measuring the number times operating cash flow covers current liabilities, and the higher the measure, the more likely firms are able to pay off any of their staggering liabilities. In 2000, they had a ratio of 0.55. 2001, a ratio of 0.48. 2002, ratio of 0.42. Although this ratio also kind of went downwards, analysts say they look for ratios above 0.40, providing Downtown Grill is a substantial restaurant to invest in. They were able to succeed in this area, especially in comparison to Casa Grande, and which was in the negatives. So next, I analyzed the quick ratio, and I explained what this was earlier as well. Now for Cheesecake, their quick ratio, just to give you an idea of where restaurants lie, was 0.74. Downtown Grill in 2000 was 0.32, 2001 0.34, and 2002 0.26. In comparison to Cheesecake, yes, that is a difference, not really, up there at Cheesecake, but in comparison to Casa Grande, they're not at, they had a really low quick ratio. So Downtown Grill kind of falls in the middle of these two companies. They're not at the top of the grid, but they're not at the bottom of the grid either. So what I'm really looking for, though, in a company is just as long as they don't go out of business. I'm not looking for an empire of a restaurant. I'm just looking for a company that knows how to run a business, and it seems that Downtown Grill isn't in debt, and they have a good turnover rate, and besides the paying suppliers back and that escalating. Everything else seemed to be fine, and they seem to be doing a lot better than Casa Grande, so I am willing to loan them that money. Now, for number 4, the first financial covenant I would require for Downtown Grill would be to reach a current ratio of 1 within 18 months. And the reasoning for this is because in order to pay off their own liabilities, this is necessary rather than having to rely on their own cash flow. Also, in the year 2000, they were at 0.93, so I feel like this is an easy goal to reach. Like, they were almost there before, so they should be able to do it. Next, I would like to make a covenant regarding their CFO to debt ratio. Within 2 years, I would like to see their CFO to debt ratio at 0.35, making them at least an investment grade company to ensure their cash from operations will be able to cover any debt they may encounter along the way. Then in 4 years, I would like them to reach a ratio of 1 to be a creditworthy company altogether when analyzing their CFO to debt ratio. The last financial covenant I would like to instate is to increase the liquidity of Downtown Grill. In order to do this, I would like to require them to have an average quick ratio every year that may not fall below 0.50. I like when restaurants or when companies have a lot of cash on hand, just in case of the emergency that they go out of business. I want to be able to have cash in hand, something I can liquidate really easily for my sake as an investor, so I can get as much money out of it as possible because I am loaning them millions of dollars. For their performance covenant, I'm going to require them to improve their operating income on sales, just like Casa Grande. Currently in the year 2002, it was negative 0.07. Therefore, I'm going to require it to increase yearly by 1.0 due to the fact that currently Cheesecake Factory has an OIS ratio of 10.78. This ratio is important to improve as it's used to compare firms within the same industry, controlling the differences in taxes, interest, and special items. And that's it.